The Asante Empire, or better yet, Confederation, is known to have been run in a very specific way. And the reason why it's called a federation is because, unlike a true empire, it did not have just one king telling everyone what to do, but instead had multiple chieftains under the king who ran their own districts. And under those chiefs were even smaller chiefs who ran their own districts, and under those chiefs, even smaller ones who would eventually answer to the people in their very local districts. This system of the Asante was to stop or to quench rebellion. This system was created to cement the power of the Asante because they realized that a alliance with groups was stronger than their enemies, in which some I will mention. These alliances could be formed in two ways, which one would be complete domination in terms of war. The second would be forming alliances with a different nation who would want to be part of the Asante kingdom, and it happened, and they would keep their sovereign power. All of them, all kingdoms kept their sovereign power. This is why they're federation. But they could be removed if they were acting against the sovereign state, against the state of the Asante, not the king, the state. This meant that when this man was removed, which he had to remove himself from the seat of office, he would be removed and replaced via election of chiefs. So a bunch of chiefs would get together and elect the next chief of that state. More than this, the powers of the Asantini, the head of the Asantini, the word king was probably not accurate back in this day. He was able to be vetoed by vote of the chieftains. So if he made a decision, though he would be the judge or the biggest, he could be vetoed by his chieftains who thought that he was acting not necessarily in the interest of the people. They were definitely able to subvert or go against their opinion when it came to decisions. Those smaller chieftains were more likely to be removed and would be removed more than once in chieftains. It happened that some Asantinis were removed. For example, Kusi Obodom was the third Asantini of the Ashanti Empire from 1750 to 1764. He was elected as the successor to Opoku Ware I, as opposed to the nominee suggested by Opoku Ware I. So, in other words, firstly, who the king nominated wasn't going to necessarily be the successor, unlike in other kingdoms. And in his election, he went and did took some events, but after the people realized that he wasn't fit for it, let's read. Domestically, Oberdom's administration instituted legal reforms such as the restoration of the full constitutional powers of the chiefs that had been limited by his predecessors in foreign policy. The Asantini sought to subdue the alliance made up of rebel provincial states and other groups that halted Ashanti dominance towards the coast. At the latter part of his reign, the alliance disintegrated and the Ashanti was able to bring down its influence. In 1764, Dahomey and the Oyo Empire supported the Akim as well as other rebel subject states. Kusi Obodom's pursuit of the rebels brought Ashanti into conflict with Dahomey and Oyo, through which the Ashanti army was defeated at the Battle of Atakpame. Kusi Obodom's growing unpopularity, along with his failing health, led to his removal from office in 1764 and the election of Osei Kwadwo as Asantini. Bodwick T. Edward published a book in 1819 that depicts the Asante rulership, and the freedoms of their parliament and their governance. Mission from Cape Coast Castle to Ashanti with a statistical account of that kingdom and geographical notices of other parts of the interior of Africa. The king, the aristocracy, now reduced to four, and the assembly of captains, are the three states of the Asante government. The constitution requires or admits an interference of the aristocracy in all foreign politics, extending even to the veto on the king's decision. But they watch rather than share the domestic administration, generally influencing it by their own opinion, but never appearing to control it from authority, and their opinions on civil questions are submitted with a deference directly in contrast to their bold declarations on the subject of war or tribute, which amount to injunction. The Ashantis advocate this constitution by the argument that the interference of the aristocracy in all foreign politics makes the nation more formidable to its enemies, who feel they cannot provoke with impunity where there are so many guardians of the military glory who, by insisting on a war, become responsible in a great degree for the issue, and pledge an energy and exertion in comparison with which such as could be excited by a despotic monarch must be deemed disinterested. They added that almost independent administrations of the king was better calculated for the domestic government, because the decrees of a monarch have naturally more force with the people over whom his power is unlimited, and further, that a civil power in the aristocracy could not be reconciled to the assembly of captains, to whom the former estate was already sufficiently invidious for the health of the constitution. In exercising his judicial authority, the king always retired in private with the aristocracy to hear their opinions, to encourage their candor without diminishing his majesty in the eye of the people, and in using his legislative prerogative, he was said always to give them a private opportunity of defending the old law rather than of objecting to the new, though from the same state policy the latter was announced to the aristocracy as well as to the assembly of captains before the people, as a sudden and arbitrary pleasure of the king. The general assembly of the cuirassiers and captains is summoned merely to give publicity to the will of the king and the aristocracy, and to provide for its observance, unless on the state of emergencies or unprecedented occasions, such as the treaty with the British government. The following anecdote related to me by many Asantes will illustrate the freedom of their constitution. A son of the king's quarreling with a son of Amaneketa told him that the comparison with himself, he was the son of a slave. This being reported to Amaneketa, he sent a party of his soldiers, who pulled down the house of the king's son and seized his person. The king, hearing of it, sent to Amaneketa, and learning the particulars, interceded for his son, and redeemed his head for 20 paragons of gold. The most original feature of their law, that of succession, has been mentioned in the history, with the argument on which it is founded. It is universally binding. The course is the brother, the sister's son, the son, the chief vassals or slave to the stool. In the Fanti country, the principal slave succeeds to the exclusion of the son, who only inherits his mother's property, frequently considerable and inheritable from her family independently of her husband. The daughters share a small part of the fetish or ornamental gold. In 1720, Sai Apoku, brother of Sai Tutu, was next placed on the stool. Had there been no brother, the sister's son would have been the heir. This extraordinary rule of succession, excluding all children but those of the sister, is founded on the argument that if the wives of the sons are faithless, the blood of the family is entirely lost in the offspring, but should the daughters deceive their husbands, it is still preserved. Sayopoku finished the building of Kumasi and exchanged compliments with the king of Dahomey, since which there has been no intercourse. The latter, probably a despotic monarch, did not wish to give his power an opportunity of contemplating the greater freedom of the Ashanti government.